Some towns were built with a built-in self-destruct button. We are about to journey into the world of towns designed to disappear, places constructed with their own expiration date stamped on the blueprint. By the end, you will see the modern world around you in a completely new way, questioning what is truly built to last. We will uncover why these places were made to vanish, from secret atomic cities to gold rush settlements that boomed and busted overnight. What does it feel like to live your entire life in a place that was never meant to exist? The blueprint itself holds the secret to their eventual vanishing. A town built to disappear is not a victim of circumstance, it is a product of intent. These are settlements designed from the ground up for a singular, temporary purpose. Once that purpose is fulfilled, the entire community is meant to be abandoned, left to the elements. This is a crucial distinction. It separates them from the countless ghost towns that withered away after a mine closed or a railroad was rerouted. Those places died by accident. The towns we are discussing were born with a built-in expiration date. They are not failures of planning, but rather its ultimate, if unsettling, success. They function like elaborate stage sets, constructed for a single, dramatic performance of human life. Every street, every building, every utility line was created with the final curtain call in mind. This intentional impermanence forced architects and planners to think in radically different ways, solving problems of community and infrastructure not for centuries, but for a few short years or decades. This history of planned impermanence reveals a fascinating pattern in human behavior. For centuries, we have constructed entire communities knowing full well they would one day be left behind. Consider the seasonal camps of nomadic peoples, designed to be packed up and moved with the herds, or the remote outposts established by colonial empires, tiny footholds in unknown lands meant only to last until the next ship arrived with new orders. These were not permanent homes in the traditional sense. They were tools, strategic assets to be used and then discarded when their utility expired. The Industrial Revolution supercharged this idea, giving rise to the company town. Corporations would build entire villages around a mine or a factory, housing workers and their families. But these communities were not investments in a lasting future. They were human machinery, a means to extract wealth from the earth. When the coal seam ran out or the timber was all cut, the company simply left and the town died with it. This was impermanence on an industrial scale. Even in times of war, this concept found its purpose. Military strategists would build entire bases or even civilian settlements with a clear end game in mind, a predetermined point where the location would be dismantled or surrendered. This long historical backdrop proves that the idea of a disposable town is not some modern anomaly. It is a thread woven through the fabric of human expansion and ambition. And this thread leads us directly to some of the most striking and iconic examples of towns that were always meant to vanish. The most striking example of a town built to vanish emerged from the fog of a world at war. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was not just a secret, it was a blank space on the map, a city that officially did not exist. Its entire reason for being was a single, monumental task: to help build the first atomic bomb. This was not a place for generations to put down roots. It was a massive, high-stakes factory disguised as a town, and every single part of it was designed for the here and now. Construction crews worked at a feverish pace, throwing up entire neighborhoods almost overnight. They used prefabricated houses known as semestos, which were made of a cheap, asbestos cement board designed for quick assembly and a short lifespan. These were not homes built for the ages. They were functional shelters, temporary quarters for a workforce recruited for a mission they knew almost nothing about. Can you imagine living there? Over 75,000 people called this temporary place home, working in colossal, windowless factories with code names like Y12 and K25. They knew they were contributing to the war effort, but the terrifying, world-altering nature of their work remained a closely guarded secret. Neighbors did not discuss their jobs with each other. Wives often had no idea what their husbands did all day. The entire community operated under a cloud of purposeful ignorance, bound together by a shared, unknown purpose. And when that purpose was finally achieved with the end of the war, the original reason for Oak Ridge's existence simply evaporated. The frantic pace of work ceased. The temporary infrastructure, having served its single, fleeting mission, began to be dismantled. While a permanent city eventually grew from these foundations, the vast, makeshift complex that housed the Manhattan Project's workforce was always meant to be a ghost town in waiting. It stands as the ultimate testament to how a national objective, no matter how immense, can birth an entire community with a built-in self-destruct button. But if Oak Ridge was a secret city built for a single purpose, the ghost towns of the American West were very public displays of raw ambition. They burst onto the scene not with the quiet intensity of a government project, but with the explosive energy of a gold rush. Places like Bodie, California, were not planned in an office with blueprints. They were born from a single, electrifying discovery that echoed across the nation, promising instant fortune to anyone willing to chase it. Prospectors, merchants, and dreamers descended on a barren patch of land, and a town would materialize from the dust almost overnight. The sound of hammers and saws was constant, but the goal was never to build a lasting legacy. It was to build just enough, just fast enough, to get at the wealth hidden deep within the earth. These were communities constructed from wood and hope, with a complete disregard for permanence. Buildings went up without foundations, leaning against each other for support on uneven ground. Streets were laid out in haphazard patterns, following the chaotic flow of human traffic rather than any grand design. There was no time for city planning when there was gold to be dug out of a nearby hillside. The entire settlement operated with a frantic, temporary energy, a collective agreement that this was all just a means to an end. Can you hear the echoes of that hustle, the crowded saloons, the clinking of glasses, the promises made in the dusty streets? For a few short years, these towns were among the most vibrant and chaotic places on the continent, pulsing with life and the desperate dream of striking it rich. But that dream had a very short shelf life. The entire economy was built on a single, non-renewable resource. When the veins of gold or silver finally ran dry, the entire reason for the town's existence vanished into thin air. There were no other industries, no other purposes to sustain the community. The population, which had arrived in a flood, left in a steady trickle, taking whatever they could carry and abandoning the rest. They left behind a perfect, eerie snapshot of a moment frozen in time. A chair pulled away from a table, a bottle left on a bar, a child's toy on the floor of a hastily vacated house. These ghost towns are not just collections of old buildings. They are monuments to a very specific kind of economic gamble, where the promise of immediate wealth was powerful enough to build a city, yet fragile enough to abandon it without a second glance. Yet this drive for secrecy and control created a paradox. These closed cities were often models of Soviet planning, with better housing, ample supplies, and superior services compared to many ordinary towns. A resident of a ZATO might enjoy a well-stocked grocery store, a modern cultural center, and a quiet, clean environment, all while living inside a heavily guarded perimeter that severed them from the outside world. Their entire existence was a trade, comfort, and community in exchange for absolute silence and isolation. Life was comfortable, but it was a gilded cage. The outside world, and even their own extended families, were often off-limits, their true work a state secret they could never discuss. Can you fathom the psychological weight of that? To be a vital cog in a national machine, yet to be utterly invisible, your home a blank spot on the map, your life a story you could never fully tell. The entire town functioned as a single, sealed unit, a perfect bubble of ideological purity and purpose. But what happens to a bubble when the air pressure outside suddenly changes? The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was that catastrophic change. The central authority that had breathed life into these secret places simply vanished. Funding dried up, the grand national projects that justified their existence were abandoned. For many ZATO, the outside world arrived not with a gradual opening, but with a sudden, jarring exposure. The gates remained, but the reason for them was gone. Some towns, like Zheleznogorsk, managed a difficult transition, repurposing their scientific expertise for new industries. But others were not so lucky. They became relics almost overnight, their specialized infrastructure useless, their populations stranded in a world that had suddenly remembered they were there, but had no place for them. The story of the ZATO is the story of towns built not just for a temporary purpose, but for a specific political reality. They were physical manifestations of an ideology, and when that ideology crumbled, the towns themselves were left questioning their very reason for being. The architecture of Impermanence follows a unique and ruthless logic. Every single decision, from the choice of building materials to the layout of the sewer lines, is made with one ultimate goal in mind: a clean and efficient exit. This is not about creating a legacy. It is about solving a temporary problem with maximum efficiency and minimum long-term commitment. The blueprint for a vanishing town is a masterpiece of pragmatic, almost brutal simplicity. The first and most obvious principle is the use of temporary materials. Why pour expensive, permanent concrete foundations when a simple wooden frame will do the job for the few years you need it? These towns are built from wood, from prefabricated asbestos cement panels like the Semestos of Oak Ridge, or from corrugated iron. These materials are chosen because they are cheap, they are readily available, and most importantly, they are easy to assemble and just as easy to walk away from. They are not meant to weather a century of storms. They are meant to provide shelter for a specific, fleeting moment in history. The very bones of the town are designed to decay. The layout of the streets themselves tells a story of temporariness. There are no grand boulevards planned for future generations, no carefully laid out parks intended to mature over decades. Instead, you find a strict grid pattern, not for beauty, but for pure, unadulterated function. It is the easiest and fastest way to lay out a new settlement, allowing for the rapid, almost mechanical, addition of new identical city blocks as the population booms. This kind of planning creates a place that feels more like a factory floor than a hometown. The infrastructure is just as minimalist. Water lines might be shallow and prone to freezing. Electrical systems are basic, just enough to power the essential machinery and lights, not built to handle a future of increased demand. The roads are often packed dirt or gravel, because why pave a road for a town that will not be here to use it in 10 years? Even the zoning, if it exists at all, is incredibly loose. A saloon might be right next to a family home, which is next to a blacksmith's forge. This is not poor planning, it is a reflection of priorities. There is no time to carefully separate commercial and residential districts when the entire point is to get the town up and running as fast as humanly possible to serve its single, all-important purpose. This entire approach creates a deeply strange form of community. It is a place that looks like a town, feels like a town, but is missing the soul of a town. It lacks the layers of history, the gradual improvements, the personal touches that come from people investing in a forever home. These disposable cities are like a photograph, a single frozen moment, while a real city is a long, evolving story. By reading these blueprints, we can see the stark truth behind these places. They were never meant to be homes in the emotional sense. They were human toolboxes, temporary camps on a colossal scale, and their design makes that unsettling intention perfectly clear. This ruthless architectural logic points to an even deeper truth, a powerful economic engine driving the entire phenomenon. Why would anyone invest the enormous capital and effort to build a town, only to plan for its abandonment from day one? The answer is almost always found in the cold, hard math of resource extraction. Imagine a massive deposit of copper discovered deep within a mountain range, or a rich vein of coal under a remote stretch of tundra. A corporation needs to get that resource out of the ground and to market as quickly and cheaply as possible. Their biggest obstacle is not the rock itself, but the people needed to break it. There is no existing city nearby to house a workforce of thousands, so the company builds one. This is the birth of the classic company town, a community entirely funded and operated by a single corporation. Every house, every store, every road is an asset on a balance sheet, a line item in a budget designed for one thing: maximizing profit. There is no incentive to build for the centuries. The incentive is to build just enough to keep workers healthy and productive for the 20 years it will take to strip the mountain bare. The town is not a community. It is a piece of industrial equipment, as disposable as a worn-out drill bit once its job is done. The economic model is brutally efficient. The company controls all costs, from rent to the price of bread at the company store, ensuring that a large portion of the wages they pay out flow directly back into corporate coffers. This creates a closed loop, a system of economic dependency that binds the worker to the company and the town. But when the resource is exhausted, that loop is broken. The corporation, having achieved its financial objective, simply pulls out. They leave behind the empty shells of buildings and a population with no economy, no future, and no way to sustain itself. This is capitalism in its most raw and transient form, where human settlements become temporary tools in the pursuit of wealth. Boomtowns follow a similar, if less centralized, path. They explode into existence on a wave of speculation, whether it is a gold rush, a land rush, or a new technology like fracking that suddenly makes a remote area valuable. People flood in, drawn by the promise of quick money, and a chaotic, makeshift city rises from nothing to meet the demand. But this kind of explosive growth is built on a bubble, and everyone knows deep down that bubbles always pop. The entire local economy is hyper-focused on that one industry. When the gold plays out, when the oil well runs dry, or when the market for that resource crashes, the air goes out of the bubble instantly. The flow of money stops, and the reason for the town's existence vanishes overnight. The economic drivers behind these vanishing acts force us to ask a difficult question. What is the true cost of this transient living? For the individuals who called these places home, the cost was often a rootless existence, a life spent in a community that they knew had no future. They built lives, friendships, and memories in a place that was always fundamentally temporary. The economic efficiency of the disposable town came with a profound human price, a legacy of impermanence etched into the lives of everyone who passed through its gates. The ultimate expression of a town built for a single purpose is found not in gold fields or corporate ledgers, but on the battlefield. military necessity has created a distinct category of phantom settlements, entire villages constructed not for living but for training or tactical advantage. These places are the purest form of a disposable town, designed from the ground up for a singular, often destructive, mission. Consider the practice villages built by Allied forces in the United Kingdom during the Second World War. In preparation for the D-Day landings, engineers constructed precise replicas of French coastal towns, complete with fortified bunkers and town squares. These were not places for community. They were elaborate, three-dimensional maps built to be rehearsed upon and then left behind. Soldiers stormed these fake beaches, learning the deadly choreography of urban combat in a place that felt real but had no past and no future. Once the training was complete, the village had served its purpose. It was often simply abandoned, a surreal and empty stage for a play that had already moved to its real location. The logic is one of ruthless efficiency. Why build a permanent town for a temporary, albeit critical, need? This principle extends to forward operating bases, those stark, sandbagged outposts that appear almost overnight in conflict zones. They are assembled from shipping containers, prefabricated huts, and miles of concertina wire. Their infrastructure is the absolute minimum required to support the mission: power, water, a landing pad. There is no thought given to a 100-year plan. The entire settlement is a tactical instrument, and like any tool, it is picked up, used, and put down when the job is done. The landscape is dotted with the ghosts of these strategic endeavors. Isolated radar stations built on remote Arctic cliffs during the Cold War, their massive dishes scanning the skies for a threat that never came. Once the geopolitical winds shifted, these high-tech outposts were simply shut down. The personnel left, the equipment was stripped out, and the buildings were left to the howling wind and freezing ice. They stand as silent monuments to a fear that has since passed, their purpose expired. These military ghost towns underscore a profound truth. When national security is the driving force, the concept of a permanent community becomes irrelevant. The land is a chessboard, and these towns are merely pieces moved across it, sacrificed or abandoned as the larger strategy demands. They are built to be forgotten, their very existence a secret often buried in classified files, their only legacy a few crumbling foundations on a well-guarded map. This knowledge of a ticking clock reshapes every aspect of daily life. In a town built to vanish, the social fabric is woven with threads of impermanence, creating a community unlike any other. Friendships form with a startling speed and intensity, born from the shared understanding that time is a limited resource. You might not know your neighbor's life story, but you know they are here for the same reason you are, facing the same strange reality. This creates a powerful, immediate bond, a camaraderie built on a common mission, whether it is winning a war or striking it rich. Yet this bond often remains curiously shallow, a pact for the present moment with an unspoken agreement not to plan too far into a future that may not include this place. Why invest deeply in a relationship you know is destined to be severed when the company pulls out or the mine closes? This transient nature even defines the most fundamental institutions. A school is built not as a cornerstone for generations of children, but as a temporary holding pen for students who will soon be gone. A church serves as a spiritual comfort station for souls in passage, not a permanent house of worship. The local store does not aim to become a beloved family business passed down through the years. It exists to supply immediate needs for a population that is just passing through. The entire social structure is functional, pragmatic, and startlingly efficient, mirroring the temporary architecture that surrounds it. But within this fleeting framework, moments of profound human connection still flare brightly. Potluck dinners under the desert stars, spontaneous celebrations in a makeshift saloon, the simple act of helping a new neighbor unpack in a prefabricated house. These moments are made more precious, not less, by the shadow of eventual abandonment. Life is lived in the present tense, with a heightened awareness that makes ordinary days feel strangely vivid. To live in such a place is to exist in a constant state of contradiction, building a life while quietly preparing to leave it all behind. The land itself can demand a town's surrender. Beyond secret projects and economic gambles, another powerful force writes expiration dates into blueprints, the relentless and unforgiving pressure of the environment. Some towns are constructed in locations known to be perilous, built on the understanding that a flood, an earthquake, or creeping poison might one day force a full retreat. These are settlements living on borrowed time from their very first day, their foundations laid in the shadow of a known threat. Others exhaust the very resources that gave them life, draining an aquifer dry or stripping the land bare until nothing remains to sustain a community. The town, having consumed its reason for existence, simply withers and dies. This is a different kind of planned obsolescence, one dictated not by a general or a CEO, but by the natural world. And now a new chapter is being written. The accelerating effects of climate change are forcing us to consider a once unthinkable concept, designing towns not just to be abandoned, but to be physically moved. Entire communities in places like Alaska and the Pacific Islands are now facing the reality of rising seas that will claim their land. Their new blueprint is not for permanence, but for relocation, a plan to carefully pick up the pieces of a town and transport them to safer ground. This is the ultimate admission that sometimes the environment holds all the cards. These environmental blueprints tell a profound story of our relationship with the planet. They show us that for all our engineering might and our desire to put down roots, we are still at the mercy of the ground beneath our feet and the sky above. A town can be a triumph of human will, but it can also be a stark lesson in humility, a reminder that nature always has the final say. You can read a town's entire story in its walls and rooftops. The architecture of a place built to disappear shouts its temporary nature from every street corner. There is no grand stonework here, no ornate carvings meant to impress future generations. Instead, you find a landscape of pure, unadorned function. Structures are thrown up using the cheapest, most readily available materials, corrugated metal that rattles in the wind, rough, untreated lumber that warps under the sun, and prefabricated panels designed for assembly by unskilled labor in a matter of hours. These buildings are not meant to age gracefully, they are meant to serve a brief purpose and then be forgotten. The designs are brutally repetitive, a sea of identical houses laid out in a strict grid. This is not a lack of imagination, it is the logic of a factory assembly line applied to an entire community. It is the fastest, most efficient way to house 1,000 people who all need the same basic thing, a roof over their head right now. Some company towns from the mid-20th century even embraced modernist ideals, using clean lines and geometric shapes not for beauty, but to promote a sense of order and efficiency. The town itself was a machine, and every house was just another identical cog in that machine. In a remote mining camp, the approach is even more stark. A building is merely a tool for shelter, a box to keep the wind and rain out. Comfort is a secondary concern, and aesthetics are a pointless luxury. There is no thought given to how the light falls in a room or how a porch might encourage neighbors to stop and chat. The only priority is utility, and yet, even within this rigid framework of pure function, the human spirit finds a way to push through. You see it in the small, defiant patches of color on a prefabricated wall, a carefully tended flower box on a temporary stoop, or a handmade curtain in a window of an otherwise identical house. These tiny acts of personalization are a quiet rebellion against the temporary, a way for people to whisper, "I was here, even if this place will not remember me." The architecture tells the cold, hard story of the town's purpose, but these small touches tell the warmer, more complicated story of the people who briefly called it home. This relentless drive for efficiency forged entirely new ways of building. The very concept of a temporary town forced engineers to become masters of assembly and disassembly, inventing methods that prioritized speed and mobility over permanence. Prefabrication was the key. Instead of constructing buildings piece by piece on site, entire wall sections, roof trusses, and floor panels were manufactured in distant factories. These modular units were then shipped to the location and bolted together like a colossal, life-sized toy set. This was not just about saving time, it was about creating a town where every single component was designed for a future journey, either to a new location or straight into a recycling yard. The infrastructure followed the same logic. Power stations were mounted on skids, water treatment plants were housed in portable containers, and sewer systems used flexible piping that could be rolled up and taken away. The entire settlement was less a fixed place and more a kit of parts, waiting to be unpacked, used, and repacked. The materials themselves evolved to meet this strange new demand. The mid-20th century saw a revolution in lightweight alloys and strong synthetic fabrics. Engineers could now design a Quonset hut, a long, arched shelter made from corrugated steel that was both incredibly strong and could be assembled by a small crew in a matter of hours. New laminated boards and weather-resistant composites meant a temporary building did not have to feel quite so temporary for the people living inside it. They could be insulated against the cold, designed to withstand high winds, and still be easy to dismantle when the mission was over. Today, this engineering philosophy has gone digital. Architects now use sophisticated building information modeling, or BIM, to plan these ephemeral cities. This is a digital process that creates a three-dimensional, intelligent model of every single element in the town, from the largest building down to the last electrical wire. Planners can run simulations to see how the town will perform over its short lifespan, identifying potential problems long before ground is ever broken. They can optimize the entire process of construction and, crucially, the eventual deconstruction. The software can even generate a precise sequence for disassembly, a reverse blueprint for the town's vanishing act. This is the ultimate fusion of planning and impermanence. The need to build a community that can disappear has consistently pushed the boundaries of engineering, turning the construction site into a laboratory for innovation. It proves that the desire to create something fleeting can be just as powerful a motivator for human ingenuity as the desire to build a legacy meant to last 1,000 years. This deep sense of temporality weaves itself into the very soul of a community. To live in a place with a known expiration date is to inhabit a constant state of psychological limbo, a world where the future is not a promise but a question mark. Residents often develop a unique and sometimes strained relationship with the concept of home. Why pour your heart into a garden you know will be reclaimed by the desert? Why paint the walls of a house that will be empty in 5 years? This impermanence discourages the deep, long-term investments, both financial and emotional, that typically anchor a person to a place. Relationships, while often intense and immediate, can carry an unspoken disclaimer, a hesitance to plan too far ahead. This underlying instability can exact a heavy toll on mental well-being, fostering anxieties about the future and a sense of rootlessness that lingers long after the town itself is gone. The community thrives on a shared, urgent purpose, but it does so under the shadow of its own inevitable end. And yet, within this strange reality, a different kind of freedom can emerge. For some, the lack of permanence is liberating. It is an adventure, a break from the predictable rhythms of a traditional life. The very transience forces people to live in the present, to seize the day with an urgency that can forge incredibly strong, if shorter-lived, bonds of camaraderie. You see this in the spontaneous block parties, the potluck dinners where everyone is welcome, the profound sense of looking out for your neighbor because you are all in this temporary experiment together. This shared fate often creates a cultural fingerprint as distinctive as the town's architecture. The music that spills from the saloons or community halls is not the sound of centuries-old tradition, but the raw, immediate expression of the moment, often tinged with themes of longing, travel, and inevitable goodbyes. Local artists might use found materials, scraps from the mine or the factory, to create works that speak to beauty and decay existing side by side. The stories told over dinner tables are not sprawling family sagas, but sharp, vivid anecdotes of the here and now, of the strange luck that brought everyone to this specific point in time. These cultural artifacts become a town's true memorial, long after the last building has fallen. They remind us that a town is never just a collection of structures on a map. It is a living, breathing tapestry of human experience, and when that tapestry is woven with threads of impermanence, it creates a pattern of profound beauty, resilience, and heartbreaking loss. A strange twist of fate now protects these towns from the very disappearance they were designed for. The ghost towns of the American West, once symbols of transience, are meticulously preserved by state parks. The secret cities of the Cold War have opened their gates to historians and curious visitors. There is a powerful irony in this, a collective decision to save what was always meant to be lost. We now pour concrete supports under buildings that were erected without foundations. We replace roofs on structures whose original blueprints called for them to decay. This is not just maintenance, it is a philosophical act, a defiance of the original intent. The most challenging task falls to the preservationists. How do you stabilize a ruin that was never supposed to stand for more than a few decades? The materials themselves fight back. Those cheap, prefabricated panels were not designed to withstand a century of freeze and thaw cycles. The untreated lumber is prone to rot and insect damage. Every repair is a delicate negotiation between authenticity and safety. Do you replace a rotten beam with a perfect modern replica, or do you use a period-appropriate technique that might itself fail in another 20 years? The goal is not to rebuild, but to arrest decay, to hold a moment in time perpetually at the brink of collapse. This work is even more complex in places shrouded in secrecy. How do you tell the story of a place like Oak Ridge, where the most important events were the secrets kept by its residents? Interpretive signs must explain the mundane details of daily life alongside the world-altering physics happening behind guarded gates. The preserved buildings are just shells. The real story is in the absent conversations, the things that were never said out loud. This transformation from a place of abandonment to a monument of memory changes everything. A mining town becomes a lesson in economic boom and bust. A secret military city becomes a museum of Cold War tension. The very act of walking through these stabilized ruins forces us to confront the temporary nature of our own endeavors. We see the ghost of a community in the objects left behind, and we are reminded that all towns, even the most permanent, are just collections of stories waiting to be told. The greatest preservation effort is not in the wood and concrete, but in ensuring that the memory of those fleeting lives does not vanish along with the towns they called home. The blueprint for disappearance has not been relegated to history books. It thrives today, simply wearing a new disguise. Look no further than the sprawling, orderly grids of a disaster relief camp, erected with breathtaking speed after an earthquake or flood. These are instant cities designed for a single, heartbreaking purpose: to provide sanctuary until a more permanent solution can be found. Their very existence is a promise that they are temporary, a hope that one day they will no longer be needed and can be quietly packed away. The same principle applies to long-term refugee settlements, which can sometimes house generations in a state of limbo. These are communities built on the foundation of a hope to return home, making their entire physical presence a profound and often painful provisional arrangement. This logic of the temporary has even been embraced for celebration. The annual Burning Man festival transforms a barren Nevada desert into a vibrant, functioning metropolis for 1 week each year. It boasts everything a city needs: streets, a hospital, a post office, and a unique cultural heartbeat. Then, as dictated by its core principle, the entire city is meticulously dismantled, leaving no trace behind. It is the ultimate expression of a disposable community, a masterpiece of planned creation and erasure for the sake of art and experience. Even the corporate world continues the tradition, though with a modern, flexible twist. Remote mining operations and oil extraction sites still house workers in vast, modular camps. But now, the new company towns might be built for tech giants or data farms, designed with an anticipated lifespan that acknowledges how quickly industries can pivot and technology can become obsolete. The timeline is flexible, but the underlying principle remains: the town serves a singular economic function and will be decommissioned when that function expires. Perhaps the most fascinating modern evolution is the concept of tactical urbanism. Here, entire cities are using temporary interventions as a testing ground. A city planner might use cheap, movable materials to create a pop-up bike lane or a temporary parklet for a few months. This allows the community to experience a potential change before committing to the immense cost and permanence of concrete and asphalt. It is a way of beta testing an idea for a city square, using the philosophy of the temporary town to improve the permanent one. These contemporary examples prove that the drive to build for the moment is not a relic of the past, but a remarkably adaptable tool, constantly being reshaped to meet the world's newest challenges and opportunities. Behind every blueprint for a vanishing town lies a profound moral question: who bears the ultimate responsibility for the lives uprooted when the final whistle blows? The architects of these temporary communities, whether corporate boards or government agencies, held immense power. They designed not just streets and sewers, but the entire social and economic reality for thousands of people. Yet, the plan often ended the moment the resource was depleted or the secret mission was complete. The ethical failure was in designing an exit strategy for the institution, but not for the human beings who called that place home. This created a legacy of abandonment that stretched far beyond empty buildings. Consider the classic company town. A corporation would build housing, a store, and a school, creating a closed economic loop where the company was the sole employer, landlord, and merchant. When the mine closed, the company simply withdrew its capital, leaving behind a population with no jobs, no way to sell their homes, and no local economy. The people were not just unemployed, they were stranded in a place that had been systematically stripped of its reason to exist. The creators of the town walked away with their profits, while the residents were left with the economic and environmental wreckage. This model treated human lives as disposable equipment, a renewable resource to be used and discarded. The environmental cost is another heavy ethical burden. These towns were often built for extractive industries, and the land itself was a resource to be consumed. Abandoned mines can leach toxic chemicals into groundwater for centuries. Military training towns left behind unexploded ordnance, turning former communities into permanent danger zones. The philosophy of impermanence provided a convenient excuse to skip the expensive and difficult process of cleaning up. The land, like the people, was simply written off as a cost of doing business. The most unsettling ethical dilemmas emerged from the secret cities. Entire populations were moved, sometimes forcibly, to make way for high-security installations. Their homes and histories were erased from the map to serve a national objective they were never allowed to know. These communities lived under a blanket of secrecy that severed their connections to the outside world, all for a purpose that might become obsolete with the next geopolitical shift. The psychological toll of that imposed isolation is an immense and often unacknowledged human cost. This history forces a difficult but necessary conversation about just transitions. If we continue to build towns for a temporary purpose, we must also build a plan for what happens next. This means investing in economic diversification long before the primary industry shuts down. It means setting aside funds from corporate profits for environmental remediation, ensuring the land is returned to a safe and usable state. It requires providing genuine support and relocation assistance for residents, treating them as partners in a transition, not as collateral damage. The blueprint for a town's end must be as carefully considered as the blueprint for its beginning, written not for efficiency but for justice. These silent, abandoned places speak to us with a surprising urgency. The lessons etched into their crumbling walls are not just historical curiosities, they are vital warnings for our own urban future. The most glaring lesson is the danger of a single economic engine. A town that lives and dies by one industry, whether it is gold, coal, or a secret government project, is a town built on a foundation of sand. Modern planners now understand that true resilience comes from a diverse economic ecosystem. A healthy city cannot just be a company town on a grander scale. It needs a mix of small businesses, tech startups, creative industries, and local services that can support each other when one sector faces a downturn. This economic diversity acts as a shock absorber, preventing the total collapse that doomed so many boomtowns when their one reason for being vanished. The very design of these ghost towns offers another profound insight: the value of flexible infrastructure. The temporary, modular nature of these places, while born of necessity, points toward a more sustainable way of building. Instead of pouring immense resources into permanent concrete monoliths that are difficult to change or repurpose, what if we designed with adaptability in mind? Imagine buildings with interchangeable parts, public spaces that can serve multiple functions, and infrastructure that can be easily upgraded or reconfigured as a city's needs evolve. This is not about building for disappearance, but about building for change. It embraces the idea that a city is a living, breathing entity that must be able to grow, shrink, and transform without requiring a complete tear down and rebuild. This philosophy aligns perfectly with modern circular economy principles, where the end of a building's life is considered at the very beginning of its design. Materials are chosen for their ability to be disassembled and reused, not just thrown away. A modern building informed by these lessons might be designed like a forest, where old trees fall and provide nutrients for new growth, creating a continuous cycle of renewal rather than a linear path to the landfill. Perhaps the most radical idea we can take from these blueprints of disappearance is the need to plan for managed decline. For decades, urban planning has been overwhelmingly focused on one thing: growth. Expansion was the only metric of success, but ghost towns force us to confront a different reality. All things, including cities, have life cycles. by studying how towns fail, we can learn how to help them contract in a graceful, humane, and environmentally sound way. This might mean designing neighborhoods that can be easily de-densified, creating greenways that reclaim abandoned areas, or having honest conversations with communities about a future that might be smaller, but could be more sustainable and tightly knit. This is not a plan for failure, but a plan for resilience. It is about creating cities that can anticipate change, bend with the wind, and never completely break. The ghost town's greatest gift is this stark reminder that by understanding how places end, we can finally begin to build ones that truly last. Hollywood would have us believe these places were lawless frontiers, ruled by gunfights at high noon. The truth is far more ordinary and in many ways far more interesting. The popular image of the chaotic, cursed ghost town is a powerful myth, but it obscures the real stories written in the dust. Many of these temporary settlements were models of rigid organization, not anarchy. A remote mining camp or a secret government city could not afford chaos. Survival depended on strict rules, shared responsibilities, and a surprising level of social order. These were communities that had to function under immense pressure, and that required cooperation, not constant duels in the street. The myth of the curse is another common misunderstanding. We hear tales of a town abandoned because of a terrible event or a supernatural omen. It makes for a good story, but the real reasons are almost always grounded in the cold, hard realities of economics or environmental change. A mine did not close because it was haunted. It closed because the ore ran out. A company did not pull out because of bad luck. It left because the profit was gone. Blaming a ghost is easier than confronting the complex and often ruthless logic of resource extraction. This tendency to romanticize or mystify these places does them a great disservice. It separates us from their history, making their fate seem like an act of magic or destiny rather than a series of human choices. When we dismiss a town as cursed, we stop asking the important questions. Who decided to build here? What was the plan from the very beginning? Who profited? And who was left behind when the money was gone? The answers to these questions connect us directly to the people who lived there. We see them not as victims of a phantom curse, but as individuals making a life within a system designed to be temporary. They built schools and churches. They held town meetings and celebrated holidays. They fell in love and raised families, all while knowing on some level that it might not last. Understanding this truth does not make their stories less dramatic. It makes them profoundly human. It replaces a shallow legend with a deeper, more respectful connection to the past, a past built not on mystery, but on the tangible, often difficult decisions that shape our world. The silent ruins of these towns are not just empty shells, they are intricate puzzles waiting to be solved. Uncovering their original blueprints requires a special kind of detective work, a forensic archaeology that pieces together a story from fragments intentionally left behind. Since these towns were never meant to be remembered, their official plans were often destroyed or lost. Archaeologists must therefore become detectives, reading the clues embedded in the landscape itself. They combine the painstaking work of traditional excavation with the poignant power of oral histories, digging through archives for any surviving document, and now using advanced technology like LIDAR. This laser scanning technology can peer through dense forest canopies to reveal the ghostly outlines of streets and foundations invisible to the naked eye, mapping an entire vanished town from the air. But the real story is in the dirt. The careful excavation of a building's foundation tells a crucial tale. Was it set deep into the earth with stone, suggesting a hope for permanence? Or was it a shallow, flimsy trench holding a temporary wooden frame, exactly as the original disposable blueprint intended? Even the town's garbage becomes a historical archive. Archaeologists meticulously sift through old trash pits, analyzing animal bones and broken bottles to understand what people ate, what they drank, and what consumer goods were available in this isolated, temporary world. A single artifact, a child's marble, a broken plate, or a worn-out shoe, can speak volumes about the daily rhythms of a life lived under the shadow of impermanence. This forensic approach does more than just reconstruct daily life. It reveals the grand design. By meticulously mapping where everything was found, archaeologists can reverse engineer the town's original purpose. The placement of a large communal hall might indicate a company's attempt to control social life. The concentration of specialized tools in one area could pinpoint a specific industrial process. This work helps us understand not just how these towns functioned, but why they ultimately failed or, in rare cases, unexpectedly succeeded. Each rusted nail and piece of china is a data point, helping to redraw a blueprint that was never meant to be saved, giving voice to the forgotten chapters of human ingenuity written in dust and decay. The very ground a town stands on can seal its fate from the very beginning. Geography is not just a backdrop for these stories of disappearance. It is often the primary author of the final chapter. A settlement might be founded in a remote, inaccessible location because that is where the gold was found or where the strategic advantage lay. But that same isolation becomes a death sentence once the initial purpose fades. There are no connecting roads to other economies, no easy way to import new goods or export new ideas. The town becomes an island, and when the tide of industry or military strategy recedes, it is simply left stranded, too difficult and too expensive to sustain. Harsh climates amplify this problem. A mining town in the frozen Arctic might have been viable when the ore was plentiful, but maintaining heat, transporting supplies, and simply surviving the endless winter becomes a crushing financial burden once the money stops flowing. The environment itself becomes an active force pushing people out. But sometimes the geographic danger is even more direct. Some towns were knowingly built in geographically precarious positions, perched on the edge of inevitability. Consider a logging community established on a steep mountainside. The very act of clear-cutting the trees that provided its wealth removes the natural anchor holding the soil in place. The first major rainstorm can trigger a catastrophic landslide, literally erasing the town from the map. Other settlements were placed directly in floodplains or in known earthquake zones, a calculated risk where the economic gain was deemed worth the potential peril. When that peril finally arrives, the town is not just abandoned, it is often destroyed, its blueprint rewritten by the forces of nature it failed to respect. This intricate dance between location and longevity forces a critical question for our own time. As we continue to build, are we truly learning from these geographic lessons, or are we still placing our bets against the land? The blueprint for disappearance is not a relic of the past, it is a template for our turbulent future. As climate change redraws coastlines and economic models shift at a dizzying pace, the logic of the temporary town is more relevant than ever. We are already seeing the early sketches of communities designed for a new kind of impermanence. Imagine climate migration waystations, entire settlements constructed not for generations, but to house populations displaced by rising seas or persistent drought. These would be transitional hubs built with the explicit purpose of being decommissioned once residents are permanently resettled, their very existence a testament to a planet in flux. The digital world is creating its own ephemeral geography. Pop-up hubs for remote workers and digital nomads could materialize in scenic locales, thriving for a season or two before the community, bound by Wi-Fi rather than railroads, moves on to the next trending destination. The very concept of a town becomes untethered from a fixed location, appearing and vanishing with the rhythms of global work and travel. And then there is the final frontier. The first settlements on the Moon or Mars will be the ultimate expression of a town built to disappear. They will be sealed, temporary habitats, perilous outposts designed for a specific mission duration, their every system engineered for a future deorbit or abandonment. They will be the most expensive, technologically advanced ghost towns ever conceived, left as silent monuments to human ambition on an alien landscape. But this new wave of temporary towns will carry the hard-learned lessons of the past. Their blueprints will be drafted with sustainability and ethical responsibility woven into their core. The exit strategy will no longer be an afterthought, but a primary design feature, ensuring that when the town's purpose is fulfilled, the people and the environment are not simply left behind. The drive to build for the moment is evolving, becoming more conscious, more adaptable, and perhaps more humane. A ghost city in China tells a very different story from a gold rush town in California. While both appear empty, the intentions behind their creation reveal a stark cultural and political divide in how societies approach the very idea of a temporary settlement. In the Western model, impermanence is often a direct result of a resource being exhausted or a mission being accomplished. The town serves a single, immediate purpose and is abandoned when that purpose is fulfilled. This is the logic of extraction, whether it is pulling gold from the earth or secrets from an atom. The end is written into the beginning, but look east and you find a more complex and speculative kind of disappearance. China's now famous ghost cities were not built for a present need, but for a future one. Vast, meticulously planned urban districts with soaring apartment towers, wide boulevards, and empty shopping malls were constructed all at once on a colossal scale. They were a bet on explosive future growth, a physical manifestation of economic confidence. But when that growth slowed or failed to materialize in the expected locations, these perfectly new cities were left waiting for inhabitants who had not yet arrived. This is impermanence born not from completion but from anticipation. The blueprint was not for a town meant to vanish, but for one that has yet to truly begin. Similarly, in Japan, the collapse of the asset price bubble in the early 90s left behind its own scars on the landscape. Entire planned communities and commercial developments, once symbols of unstoppable economic ascent, were frozen in time. These are not towns abandoned after a boom, but monuments to a boom that suddenly went bust, their emptiness a silent testament to the risks of speculative overreach. The driver here is not a finished mission, but a drastically altered economic reality. This global comparison forces us to ask a deeper question. Is a town more defined by the reason it was built, or by the reason it was left behind? In the West, the end is often the final, logical step of a plan. In the East, these modern ghost towns represent a plan that was dramatically interrupted, a future that was promised but then postponed indefinitely. One model shows us the aftermath of consumption, while the other shows us the weight of expectation. Both, however, teach us that the rise and fall of human settlements is never just about bricks and mortar. It is a powerful reflection of the economic systems, political wills, and deep-seated cultural beliefs that decide whether a place is built to last or built to wait. The silence of a ghost town is never truly empty. It is filled with stories waiting to be told. Long after the last resident has left, these abandoned places find a second life in the world of art and literature, their crumbling walls transformed into powerful symbols of nostalgia, loss, and an almost stubborn human resilience. Photographers were among the first to recognize this haunting beauty. Ansel Adams did not just document the weathered buildings of Bodie, California. He captured its soul, using his camera to frame the poignant stillness of a life interrupted. His images, and those of countless photographers since, turned decay into a form of art, finding profound meaning in a child's rusted bicycle left leaning against a wall or a dusty bottle still sitting on a saloon bar. Writers, too, have been drawn to these vacant stages. Novelists like Robert Coover, in his book aptly titled Ghost Town, use these settings as backdrops to explore themes of human folly and the enduring spirit of endurance. A ghost town is the perfect metaphor, a physical place where the past is always palpably present, where the dreams of yesterday are literally frozen in time. Filmmakers instinctively understand this dramatic potential. The lonely, sweeping shot of a deserted main street immediately sets a tone, telling the audience that this is a story about memory, about what was lost, and about the shadows that remain. This creative impulse is not confined to just portraying these places. It often spills directly onto their surfaces. In more modern abandonments, the rusted side of a forgotten factory becomes a canvas for a sprawling mural, a vibrant burst of life painted onto a corpse of industry. This cultural output does something remarkable. It ensures the town's legacy continues to evolve long after its original purpose has been forgotten. The physical town may slowly surrender to the elements, but its story, reinterpreted and reimagined by each new generation of artists, becomes immortal. These places cease to be just failed settlements. They become eternal muses, their silence speaking volumes through every brushstroke, every written word, and every frame of film. The silence of these places is no longer absolute, and you can walk directly into their stories today. The ghost towns of the American West welcome visitors with open, if crumbling, arms, their dusty main streets preserved as state parks where history feels chillingly immediate. For the more adventurous, the sand-buried mansions of Kolmanskap in Namibia offer an unforgettable journey where you wade through doorways filled with desert dunes. Other sites demand more preparation. To walk the empty squares of Pripyat near Chernobyl requires an official guide, a sobering reminder that some ruins are born from tragedy and still hold palpable danger. These guided tours are not thrill-seeking adventures, but respectful pilgrimages into a past that vanished in an instant. Even the once top-secret city of Oak Ridge now offers public tours of its original facilities, the massive machines that built the atom bomb, now silent museum pieces. What is it like to stand in a classroom where the desks are still covered in dust, or in a hospital corridor where nature has slowly pushed through the cracked tiles? The experience is humbling, a direct physical connection to the fleeting nature of ambition and community. For those who cannot make the journey, technology brings these worlds to your screen. Detailed digital archives host thousands of photographs and personal letters from former residents. Museums offer immersive virtual reality tours that let you stand in the center of an abandoned town square, listening to the wind where a community once thrived. Documentaries weave together archival footage and interviews with the last surviving residents, their voices giving emotional weight to the crumbling walls. This access transforms these towns from abstract ideas into tangible, relatable history. It allows us to not just learn about them, but to feel their presence, to understand the scale of the dreams they contained and the quiet mystery they left behind. Engaging with these places, whether in person or from afar, is a powerful act of preservation, ensuring that the lessons etched into their decaying blueprints are not forgotten. Their silent, empty streets are our most powerful teachers. These towns built to disappear force us to confront a profound truth, that nothing we build is truly permanent, not even the places we call home. Their stories are not just tales of abandonment, but profound lessons in human adaptability, showing us how communities can thrive even under the shadow of their own end. They reveal the full weight of our ambitions, the incredible things we can achieve when focused on a single goal, and the often devastating consequences that follow when that goal is all that matters. In their rise and fall, we see the delicate, eternal dance between creation and decay, a cycle that governs everything from a single building to an entire civilization. By carefully unearthing their original blueprints, we gain something rare, a clear window into how societies navigate the challenges of transience. We learn how to build for a purpose, but also how to abandon with responsibility. This knowledge is not just about understanding the past, it is a crucial tool for our future. As we look at our own cities today, we must ask ourselves what legacies we are now building. Which of our own soaring towers and quiet neighborhoods might someday be the ghost towns of tomorrow, and what will they say about the choices we made? Thank you for joining this journey into the shadows of history.